students who come to NC State and alums and people in general don't know much about the bell tower. I mean, they don't know why it's there, who it's dedicated to, or any of the history. And I wish we could find a way to share more of that history with our students when they first come in. So I'm doing my part now to do it on the other end. It's taking you a little longer than your freshman year at NC State, but hopefully you'll learn a lot about the university and the bell tower, and that you'll enjoy the tour. I want to go back to the year and the month and the day on which NC State was established. So who can give me that exact date?
March of 1887, but I don't know the exact day.
Okay, it's March the 7th, 1887. It's easy to remember the 7th of the month and then the last digit in the year. So March the 7th, 1887 was when we were established. And that was done by act of the North Carolina General Assembly, who passed the resolution that created the college. And can anybody give me our first name? When we were established in 1887, what was our first name? Agricultural and mechanic. That's the one way to remember it, A&M. If you look at some of the early pictures of the sports teams, what do they have on their jerseys? A&M. So the first name was the North Carolina College of Agriculture and Mechanic Arts. Not mechanical, but mechanic. And of course today, mechanic has been translated to engineering. So that was our first name, and it took over 2 years. In fact, it took almost 2.5 years after we were established before the college was ready to start. So if you're going to start a new college, what do you have to do? What do you have to do to get ready to enroll a first group of students? What have you got to have? You got to have an administration, she said. What else?
Land,
you got to have teachers, land, building, food. There you go. You got that right. Anybody say money? You got to have some money.
Yeah, money definitely.
Okay, so it took a long time, but in the fall of 1889, all that had been done. And that had been done because Richard Stanhope Pullen, anybody recognize that name? Right across the street, the Pullen Park. He was a wealthy landowner in this part of Raleigh, and he donated the first tract of land on which the first building was built. And that tract of land was right here. You know, we're standing on it right now. And so he donated the land, they built the first building, and they selected the first group of students. They hired the faculty and hired a president, and so they were ready to get started. And so when the first group of students arrived to begin the college, what do you think they saw?
Holladay Hall.
This is what they saw right there. What is that? That's Holladay Hall. Actually, when this picture was made in the first year we opened in 1889 and 1890, this building was not called Holladay Hall. And that's because it was not named for our first president until after he retired in the early 1900s. So this building was actually called, anybody want to take a guess?
Main building.
Who said Main?
Main. It'd be like the main building.
I love that name because this was the only building. And yet they still call it Main Hall.
They had visions. They had visions.
They knew that there would be a lot of other buildings. So when the first students arrived and they walked up and they saw this, that's all they saw. Now, if I'd come all the way from up in the western part of the state and walked over and that's all I saw, I don't know, I might have turned around and gone back home. So, everything the college needed was in this one building. The students lived on the top 2 floors. The main floor was the classrooms and the faculty office spaces and a small library. And the lower level had the dining hall, the infirmary, in case anybody got sick, and a small gym, a place to work out, and a workshop. So everything the college needed was in this one building, except for one thing. There was no running water in the building, and so if you needed to go to the bathroom, you had to go outside to an outhouse.
That's why it was the main building.
There you go.
It was a secondary building.
That's, you know, you just given me the best answer yet to the reason why they called it the main building. Just in case you got confused between this big building and that one outhouse that was back there. Okay, in this picture you can see the students that are hanging out on the top of the portico. And there's one guy that's actually hanging over the edge.
Student for you, yeah.
If you can see that guy, see him hanging over the edge? Yeah. So this guy right here that doesn't have any better sense, where was he hanging in this picture? Now look how high that is.
Oh, wow.
So if he had slipped off of there, at any rate, the first president, President Holladay, is standing in the window to his office right there. And if you look at that window today, that is the window of our chancellor. It's the same office. And also, if you look very closely in this picture, you can see the very first Wolfline bus.
All right.
No, that horse is there.
Oh yeah, there it is in front.
The very first Wolfline bus. And when this picture was taken, that bus was parked right there. Okay, so that's how we got started. That's what it looked like when we began. Now, what do you think the first group of students looked like?
Yeah.
There they are, the very first class of students. So when I ask people to describe the first class, it's pretty easy to do so. What do you say?
Young white male.
They're all white males. And not only that, back in 1889, when you graduated from high school in North Carolina, you were probably 14 or 15 or 16 years old.
Oh, wow, that's
So
young.
a lot of the men in this picture are very young. Now there's one very notable exception to
Except for
that.
one with the mustache.
I don't know where he came from, but I'll tell you what, he's not 14 years old. But a lot of the rest of them were. Okay, now, the reason I like this picture so much, and I've used this photograph when I did the welcome at orientation for freshmen and when I do my bell tower tours. And I like to use this picture to illustrate how the student body at NC State has changed from the time that we began. At the very beginning, all white men. Today, we have almost as many women as men. It's really, really close. We've got students from all racial categories enrolled at NC State. We've got students from all around the world here. So today, we're a much more diverse campus, and this is a very, very important value for our university. Now, where do you think these guys were standing when that picture was made?
Right here.
What? Right here? You mean you think it was standing on the same spot that you guys are standing on today? Do you think there was a particular reason why I asked you to stand here and for me to take a picture?
This is the foundation.
Because I now have a picture of you guys on these same steps, the same place they stood when that picture was made. And look at the difference. You know, isn't it incredible? Now, this was taken probably 124 years ago, something like that. Can you feel the presence of these guys standing on these steps today, 124 years later? If you look at this picture really hard and you really think about it and you really concentrate, You can feel their presence right here today, 124 years later. And that's why I say that our great university began on these steps. It didn't begin out there on the sidewalk. It didn't begin inside in a classroom or in a dorm room. NC State began right here on these steps. And this is my proof. And until somebody can prove otherwise, guess what? I'm sticking to my story. So I consider these steps to be a sacred place at NC State. It's where we began. Okay, now I want to tell you one of the coolest stories that I've ever had the opportunity to tell. Oh, by the way, before I leave this picture, the very first student at NC State, did anybody know who that was? What his name was? His name was Walter Matthews. Some of you may recognize that name. The Alumni Association today gives a very prestigious award to 2 or 3 students who graduate who've given the most service to the university. And it's named for him. It's called the Matthews Medal, and that's him right there.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Right there. So if you want to feel the presence of the first class and the first student, he's standing. That's you.
I feel it.
Can you feel his the first student, Walter Matthews. And how do we know he was the first student?
First one that enrolled, signed up for.
He probably was the first one that signed a book or something that they had in there when they arrived. Okay, any other questions about the early history? Oh, I forgot. I think I did forget to tell you that the first day of classes, once they got here and got signed in and got moved in, the first day of classes was October the 3rd, 1889. So March 7, 1887, 2.5 years later, classes began October the 3rd, 1889.
Nobody would have graduated that next
That's correct.
spring.
It would have been, the first graduation would have been, let's see, 89, would have been 92. I mean, 92. All right, we're going to move, as I said, you can take pictures at any point. We're going to move now from the front steps of Holladay Hall where we began and around, and I'm going to take you inside the building for our next stop. Okay, you ready?